Ahoy, this is David Perry and my continuing series of online interviews with colleagues and artists from around the country, actually around the world, and how we get from the great pause into the great return. And today we're focusing on a true Bay Area treasure, actually an international treasure, the largest collection on planet Earth of typography and type forms, what I like to call its people who are font fans. And we have in the Zoom room 2 students and 2 teachers from Letterform Archive. So we're going to go from left to right, and I'll leave each of you introduce yourself and tell us whether you're a student or a teacher and why you came to Letterform Archive. Morgan, let's start with you.
Hi, my name is Morgan Prenger, and I am a UX visual designer. And what brought me to the Letterform Archive was the fact that I felt that my graphic experience was really lacking in understanding typography, and typography is a huge part of graphic design. So I really wanted to make sure that I was getting that education to be obviously the best graphic designer that I could be.
Great. Kevin?
Hi, my name is Kevin Barrett Kane. I'm a book designer at Stanford University Press and a student in the Typewest program at Letterform Archive with Morgan. The reason why I came into Typewest was I was similarly looking for ways to expand my my repertoire in design, specifically in regards to typeface design and sort of the study of typefaces as well in their history.
Graham.
Yeah, I'm Graham Bradley, and I am a type designer and an instructor at the archive. I initially came to the archive for research, actually, to look at a few things in the collection, and I fell in love with the community and am really lucky to be able to teach there.
And James.
I'm an instructor at Typewest, and I've been doing that for a couple years now. I think I came to it originally because I'm always interested in meeting the designers and the people that are enthusiastic about type in a really genuine way. And it never felt like weird, networky, kind of gross business feeling type of hangs when I would see the people over there. And when I met them, I was like, oh, these are my people. I really value education, and I've had a great experience there with my own education. So just want to continue that on as a part of the community.
So Kevin, as an instructor, what do you hope to bring to your students? I'm sorry, Graham, as a teacher. I haven't had my coffee yet, I apologize. Graham, as an instructor, what is it you hope to bring to your students at Letterform?
So I teach, I kind of have two roles as a teacher at Letterform Archive. One of them is that I teach an introductory type design class that's like 10 weeks long. That class is often students' first foray into type design. The students that enroll in it tend to have graphic design experience and are interested in type design. And for that class, my goal as a teacher is just to get everybody really excited to do more type design. And then I also teach in the Typewest certificate program, and that program is a bit, it's a 1-year program, and so it's a little more there's a little more of an arc in terms of development as a type designer, and a variety of kind of skills and history, and a lot of components are covered in that program. And it's a more it's just a little more robust, and I think that my role there is a little bit it's not only about like the excitement and getting everybody really interested in type design, but really like teaching the methodology and design skills that are kind of part of the profession and the discipline. Yeah.
Now, Morgan, you said that you work for YouTube, correct?
Yep.
What does YouTube have to do with fonts? Why does YouTube need Letterform Archive And why does YouTube need Morgan?
That's a good question. I just want to say I love working for YouTube. I used to do more so product design, but my role has recently shifted to more cultural work. So I work with the teams to create a lot of posters and logos and just making sure that everyone in the office is feeling loved and noticed and celebrating every win we can. And what I found is that since starting the Letterform Archive, a lot of my designs are just so much better than they would have been prior, because now I have a better understanding of potentially types that I'm pulling from in certain eras. One specific example was I was designing a retro throwback poster that was really involved and steeped in this 70s psychedelic culture, and old Morgan would have just, gone on the internet and seen a lot of examples, but I felt like I was really empowered already with a decent understanding, and then I was able to do the proper research, and therefore the final result felt really authentic. And everyone who saw it, I think, really appreciated that too, especially those that were around in the 70s. And so I think just that in general, it's just made my designs better, and my coworkers notice that and they get excited about it. And, for product itself, we do have our own typeface. We recently created our own YouTube sans. Now, I did not have a part in designing that, but I think it just goes to show how important having your own font is when you're creating brand equity and whatnot. So fonts are very important.
Right. Well, I mean, as someone who's been in public relations for 36 years, I know the importance of font and how instantly it can brand something. We know the Google font, we know the YouTube font. Of course, hearing that the 70s is considering retro is a bit sobering to me. So I'll just move on from that. Kevin, as a book designer, how important is the font to you as an artist, as a designer? And how important do you think it is to the overall understanding and appreciation of a book?
Yeah, that's a great question. With book design, we're thinking about type and fonts on a macro scale often, especially with the interior. And so, there is that at that point, you're talking about type as an equal part. Obviously it's a designed thing, right? A designed sort of system, but then you're talking also about legibility and familiarity, and these are all important aspects of type design that we do consider in our sort of teaching and building of different typefaces. And so, I guess to your question, the importance of a font inside of a book is to convey both. It holds the information, right? It has to be, and therefore it has to be legible and familiar. But it also conveys a sense of style, and different typefaces overall have different sort of moods to them, and that we carefully consider when pairing with certain content.
James, one of the things that I remember when I first started working with Letterform Archive was a conversation I had with Rob Saunders and Johnny Abbott-Smith, and we were there in the former space pre-COVID. And I remember him saying that there were two things that he wanted people to understand about the archive. It was that it was all about radical accessibility, i.e., for instance, I was able to touch a 16th century manuscript from the Vatican archives from Pope Leo X. The fact that I knew it was Pope Leo X seemed to stun Johnny. But we all have our hobbies, and so, ask me about a Medici, I'm your guy. And the other was serendipity, that the people's experience, the students' experience of coming to the Letterform Archive was about saying, oh, well, that's pretty cool, and then looking on the table and seeing something else and finding something you didn't expect, and also doing that now via the online archive. You said just a few minutes ago that you had found your people at Letterform Archive. What is important about the experience of Letterform to you as a teacher, as an educator?
I don't know. You touched on a couple of different things there, but as a teacher, I really want to provide a space for the students to feel super comfortable. It's really scary to learn anything in front of other people, it's like being at school. Gives a lot of folks anxiety. Then you make them draw in front of other people, and it's like, oh my God, this is humiliating. You look to the person left or right of you, and you're like, oh, that looks super good. Mine doesn't look good, you know? So there's so many things working against you. But what I love about the archive is every time I go there, I feel very much at home. Everyone is extremely kind and warm and welcoming, and I think that really provides a wonderful environment in which to learn. So I joke around a lot in class, and I really try and keep it light, and that's partly just kind of who I am as a person, but it's also deliberate because I want the students to feel comfortable, because then I think they can do their best work and kind of learn the most.
Graham, you're involved in the certification process. It's coming along soon, Typewest, correct?
Yep.
Talk to me about what students are going to experience in this certification process. And my understanding is that it is the only such certification process on the entire West Coast of the United States, probably one of the few in the United States.
Yeah. Yeah, on that note, I think that's something really special about the Typewest program and Letterform Archive. When I was, kind of getting into the field, I felt like I had to go to New York to get an education in type design. And I think it's really special that we have this in California. Yeah, the Typewest program it's 3 terms, so it's 1 year. And the way that it's structured is students start working usually on a revival project where they are looking at a historic source and making a digital typeface based on that. Usually it's the source material is like a metal typeface. So there's a lot of interpretation there, and kind of exploring the tools and the history a little bit, and how typefaces have been made in the past. And then for the remainder of the program, for the next 2 terms, students work on an original design. And that's really fun. That's kind of where it gets, interesting and expressive, and everyone is kind of bringing their own interests and design sensibilities to their projects. And at the end of the program, they have made, a type family of sorts. There's usually like a few weights or something, and maybe an italic, and they've kind of gone through this process of envisioning a typeface and then making it real, and kind of working through a lot of design questions with the instructors. And we have a really great team of teachers. So James and I, we're both instructors there, but there are usually 2 instructors per term, and they rotate. And so students get a lot of great perspectives from the type design community in the Bay Area, and then also from visiting instructors too. And I should also add, that's just the design component. There's also a history class as well, and that's taught by Grenda Lockvist, and so that's a big part of it too, right? So that relies heavily on the materials of the archive, and the 2 classes work really nicely together.
Morgan, what skill have you learned or taken away from the experience of Letterform Archive that has been most useful to you at YouTube?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think for me, I went into this program thinking I knew, I know about letters. This will just be something to enhance myself. But I was pretty shocked with how much my knowledge was just not up to snuff, like the optical illusions of type, and I create a letter and then I see why it's wonky. There's just so much you don't know until you really start paying attention to each individual letter. And that has been invaluable. And sort of to James' point, there's this sense of community, and you do look around and you see, I'm surrounded by amazing designers in the Bay Area, and you see what they're doing, but it's not a competitive thing. It's really more of like everyone's bringing this extra juge to the team, and we're all sort of feeding off of that energy, and we're all literally just there to get better. And so I think that camaraderie and that community has been incredible as well. Sometimes I'll field questions to our little Slack channel if I've got some, or I know a few of our classmates will also put in work that they're doing and just getting crit and feedback. And that's another really nice source of information that we can provide for each other, which is really great.
I'm glad to hear the word juge hasn't gone out of fashion yet. Although I've never seen anyone spell it. If someone finds...
I can never spell it correctly, and when I try to Google it, it's a mess.
I know.
But I do like saying it.
I know. Every time I use it, someone's like, how do you spell that? I'm like, stop, it's cuneiform. I don't know. I don't know. Yeah. I've always been someone who loves books. The best gifts I ever got were books. I remember my formative years when I was all your age was in Washington, D.C. And then you could still, in those pre-Diluvian days, walk into the Library of Congress and actually get a book and sit down and read it in the reading room. I don't know if you've ever had the honor of going to the Library of Congress, but it really is a temple of knowledge. I remember one day I was on the plaza and I was just reading, and these tourists drove up quickly. Father left his family in the car. He ran up. You could tell they were just doing the monuments in DC. He ran back out, and his wife leaned over and said, well, what's in there? He said, oh, it's only books. I was super upset by that. It's like, only books. Only books, the temple of books.
Similar to your experience, the exposure of some of those older pieces that are from centuries ago, and you got to wash your hands first, but you get to touch them, and I feel honored. I'm like, I don't think I'm allowed to, but you can turn the pages, and there's something about that tactile experience that is super special.
I totally agree. As I've said, the high-tech, high-touch aspect of letterform is unique. I mean, touching a 4,000-year-old cuneiform tablet letterform, I still get giggly thinking about it. It's just something. Kevin, obviously you love books and you design books. Talk to me about the experiential difference between experience in a book and the design of a book and the fonts and the letterforms digitally and in print. Does it change you as a designer when you know, okay, this is going to be appreciated on the screen and this is going to be picked up and read and flipped through?
Well, you're going to open a whole can of worms there with me. I have strong opinions about digital reading experience, namely that I try to avoid it as much as possible. I do try to commit myself in my practice to the printed matter of type, and try to stay away as much as possible from digital e-readers and such things. That they really do degrade the experience of book reading in a traditional sense in a lot of ways. They are getting better, and that's exciting to see. But one of the great things about the Letterform Archive in the space is again, you can't over exaggerate the experience of encountering those artifacts and those objects in person with the tactile and physical quality that they have. The archive is pretty nicely split between posters and printed ephemera and actual printed bound books, and both are super informative when you're designing whatever it is that you need to design, whether it be a book or a poster or a typeface. They have materials there from type design history going back centuries that can inform all of that process. And I miss that. I'm very much looking forward to getting back into the space. We actually, the Letterform Archive moved to the Dog Patch, and my partner and I just moved to the Dog Patch, so we're right across the street. But we can't go over there yet, but hopefully soon.
I'm glad to hear that you say that. I remember when ebooks first became a thing, I guess 15 years ago. My husband, who is a designer and also a techie, we were on a flight to his home in Spain, transatlantic, and he hadn't charged his e-reader. And so somewhere over Newfoundland, his e-reader died. And I remember I picked up my book and I said, look, my battery still works. And I can go back and I can go forward. Yeah, it was not a pleasant flight. So James, two questions as we wrap up. We've got about 5 minutes left. What is your favorite font and why? And also, what is your favorite item in the Letterform archive, either digitally or tactile?
Those are two just absolutely brutal questions.
I know, that's why I chose you for it. So
that's really, really difficult. So favorite font changes frequently, and I could name some kind of obscure font that like I really, really respond to, but then no one else will know what it is. So like if someone asks you your favorite band and you tell them a band that they've never heard of, they're just like, cool, you know? So like what kind of answer? Can't really do too much with that. So maybe let's go favorite system font, meaning a favorite font that's installed on every computer in the world. Maybe that would be a more specific question. And for that, I mean, my go-to is definitely Hobo, which is like a 1905 Art Nouveau design. And I'm really enamored with Hobo and have done a digital revival of it. Favorite object in the library, again, is too hard a question, so I will then make it more specific on myself and say favorite psychedelic Fillmore poster in the library is this one from Lee Conklin, and all the people at the archive will know which one is my favorite, but Lee Conklin was an incredible artist and lettering person that had a way of hiding images and putting illustrations into the letters themselves, obviously. A lot of people do that, but he also put illustrations into the negative spaces of the same letters. So as you're reading the Fillmore, first of all, you just read the Fillmore, and then you start seeing all of these body parts and naked ladies come out of the positive and negative spaces. And it's a crazy experience, and it really starts kind of messing with you in an interesting way.
Graham, same question for you.
Oh, that's tough. I was hoping that it was just going to land on James. I wouldn't have to answer it. Let's see.
Favorite system font?
Yeah, I'll definitely take the system font route. Lately, I've been working on something that is like for screens in particular, and so I've been looking a lot at Verdana, which is a Matthew Carter typeface that I think is just extremely well made. So that's a great one. Favorite archive object? I think I'll go with kind of a genre. I personally really like, I find the old, so like before typefaces were digital, foundries used to publish these big specimen books that had all of their metal like typefaces, like samples of all their typefaces in them. And the archive has a great, like a really wide and deep selection of those big bound specimen books from a lot of really influential type foundries from the past like 200 years. And I find that whole genre to be just very helpful. And it's amazing to be able to go to the archive and actually like flip through these big books. They're really invaluable as a designer to reference. And so I love that whole genre. And in particular, I'm really into the Bruce type foundry, which was in New York in the late 19th century. So that's a particular favorite area for me.
Got it. So for the two students, Morgan and Kevin, the question's a little different. Morgan, what is a book or graphic experience that was a real aha moment for you? A moment when you went, wow, you'll never forget that book. You'll never forget that graphic letter form. A real memorable.
One that you've been exposed to at the Letterform Archive?
Not necessarily.
Or
No, not necessarily. You have your entire long history to pick from.
I don't like these questions. These are tough. Yeah, that's a good question. Oh God, I'm going to flub her name. I can never pronounce it correctly, but her name is Marianne Bagiles or something. But she does a lot of really experimental typography, and that is something that I really love when typography and art sort of mix together. I guess a little bit in that way that James was mentioning earlier with the poster designer. When you make a piece of art that is so heavily type forward but is still an art piece, I get really jazzed about that. So her book has been really, really interesting, and it's very intricate, and you can tell a lot of time went into it. But God, there's a long list. That's just the most recent one I've been sort of diving into.
There you go. How about you, Kevin?
I'm going to have to name an experience paired with an object. In the Typewest program, we have both, those semester breakups that Graham was talking about, and then the two classes, type design and type history, but there's also a series of workshops which occur over the weekends typically. Those are incredible because they bring in, obviously the instructors at Typewest are amazing designers in and of themselves, but these weekend workshops, you're able to get the hottest superheroes of type history to come in. And one such experience was with the master calligrapher John Stevens, who taught a weekend workshop that I think really just blew everybody's mind, just on the traditional Roman proportion of basically based on the Trajan column. And we were able to look at, because we had access to the archive, Father Katich's charcoal rubbings of the Trajan column, which informed a whole series of speculations that he had that these Roman inscriptors actually painted the letters onto the Trajan column before carving them. And we did that painting ourselves over the weekend workshop, and it gives me goosebumps. That whole weekend was watching John Stevens just with his paintbrush. I could do that for days on end, just watch him work.
Great.
He made it look too easy.
So easy.
Well, before I ask the last question, for me, I grew up with two books that had a huge impact on my life because of how they look, the font, but the stories. And they're considered children's books, but I read them every few years, especially during COVID, because they always kind of lift me up. And one is the entire series of Winnie the Pooh books. The fonts were beautifully artistic, and they had the little bear walking through. And then also books by C.S. Lewis, the Tales of Narnia, which I found incredibly interesting. And James, I was really boring when I was your age. My favorite band was the Carpenters, so we'll just leave that alone.
I also love the Carpenters.
You're kidding me. I thought you were going to laugh at me.
Why do birds?
Stop. I'll cry. Barbara Streisand said that Karen Carpenter had like a voice like liquid honey, I think she said, like liquid honey. Oh my God, James.
And Karen Carpenter, she was a drummer first and a singer second.
Battle of the Bands, Hollywood Bowl, 1960, whatever. Okay, James, we're going to talk. All right, last question for each of you. And thank you all. This has been a really fun conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time as student and teachers and font fans, as I call it. We'll start with Morgan and go around and end with Graham. One or two words or even a sentence that describe your experience of Letterform Archive. Morgan?
Let's see. A few words would be growth, community, and I think exposure. Those would be the big ones for me.
Kevin?
I mean, I can't not repeat Rob Saunders' go-to. It's radically accessible.
James?
Kindness, humanity, and education.
Graham?
And those are also good. I think I'll just follow it up and say friends. When I think about the archive and just all of the staff there and the students and the teachers and the whole community, it's just has a very like friendly and kind nature to it, and that's one of the things I really love about it.
Great. Great. And well, and for me, it's one of my favorite words also to quote Rob Saunders, serendipity. Or as Thomas Jefferson once said, I wouldn't want to live in a world without books. Thank you all for speaking with me. Morgan, Kevin, James, and Graham, I really appreciate it. And James, I'll be sending you some YouTube videos of Karen Carpenter. This is David Perry. This is David Perry reporting. Ahoy.